Welcome to On the DOT. On today's episode, we speak to INDOT Roadside Maintenance Specialist Matt Kraushar. Matt joined us last fall to discuss INDOT's mowing and vegetation management policies, and he briefly spoke about INDOT's litter abatement projects. On this episode, we're going to spend more time discussing litter, including what INDOT is doing to ramp up beautification and how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected those efforts. Matt also touches on updates that have been made to mowing and vegetation management policies since he was last on the podcast, and tells us about some new technology being employed to give taxpayers more value for their dollar. Before we begin, please take a moment and download the INDOT app for Apple and Android devices. You can also visit our website, indot.in.gov, for more content and information. Now, let's join INDOT Southwest Communications Director Jason Tiller for his conversation with Matt Kraushar.
Did you know that INDOT Freight helps make your drive safer by helping truckers find a safe, legal parking spot for their mandated breaks? To learn more about the Truck Parking Information Management System and other multimodal projects, go to multimodal.indot.in.gov.
Welcome to On the DOT. I'm Jason Tiller, Communications Director for INDOT Southwest, and we're joined by a familiar face this episode, Matt Kraushar. Of course, Matt, you were on last year to talk about mowing and vegetation management and litter pickup and all of the many wonderful things that you do in your shop. It's great to have you back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jason.
I'm glad to have you. So last time we talked a lot about mowing, and I think we will talk about mowing a little bit in this episode as well, because there are some policy and procedure things that are probably a little different from last year. But I want to focus this episode more on litter, because that seems to be one of our biggest customer service, I don't want to say complaints, but it's one of the things we hear about, it seems like, the most. And maybe this year even more so than normal, because you wouldn't believe it if you were just, someone listening to this podcast that had just stumbled upon it. But COVID actually really affected the way we do trash pickup. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure, Jason. Yeah, and so you mentioned the customer complaints. I think really it's more of a request or something like that really comes in as trying to talk about it. So folks see a lot of litter on the side of the road, and so from the COVID-19 pandemic and how that impacted, it was not just INDOT, it was all DOTs across the country went through and really looked at their practices and how that was going to impact their staff and even the Adopt a Highway volunteers and everybody that was involved in that process. And there was a lot of unknowns associated with the virus and how that can be transmitted and everything else. And so picking up other people's trash that was in direct communication with them and everything was one of those things that we hit the brakes on and wanted to make sure that we understood fully before we started picking up or changing our practices to do that. And so it's been an interesting piece to try to come back out of that. There's been a lot of interested volunteer groups, for instance, that are some of our Adopt a Highway groups that have wanted to start picking up, starting collecting again, and we had to carefully evaluate what that looked like for our staff and the interactions that they would have with those volunteer groups, and making sure that it was safe for everybody else to be gathering and following the CDC guidelines associated with that. So,
and see, that's something you don't think about. I think, when we put the moratorium, is that the right way to say it, a moratorium on trash pickup?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So when we put the moratorium for our crews, it was out of safety concerns for, our people out on the road. Obviously, everything has gone contactless at this point. There's even contactless pizza delivery, things like that. And because it was such a major concern that, that COVID it could survive on surfaces. So if you came in contact with a surface that someone had touched and they had COVID, you could potentially get it. And, that's one of the reasons why we put the moratorium out. But you wouldn't think of it like that because, for the most part, people just look out and it's trash on the roadway. You don't think scientifically like that. It's amazing.
Sure. So our staff were still going out and picking up those large pieces of debris or something that came out of the back of a vehicle or fell off of a vehicle and stuff like that. So it wasn't that we were not doing any collection by any means. But in terms of safety stuff that was on the roadway, we would still be clearing those debris. But, with the contactless piece like you're talking about, I know we definitely increased the amount of carryout that we had, and with carryout comes more disposable components and the like, and with that comes more litter. And not to mention, one of the discussions that I had with one of our contractors actually talked about PPE that, like our masks that everybody is wearing. I'm holding one in my hand right now as we're separated here, and we're picking up masks on the side of the road because these things are being discarded by folks as they're driving down the road. Gloves for a while. There were just lots and lots of gloves that were being discarded.
And that's scary too, because like
Sure.
I've always equated masks to like that. Like you shouldn't share a mask.
It's a biohazard,
yeah,
right?
That's basically like sharing somebody's underwear.
Sure.
I mean, but yeah, that's crazy to think that all those disposable masks, and I'm probably sure even not disposable ones are being picked up.
Cloth
Ones people have lost.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely crazy. But continue. Let's talk a little bit about. You mentioned PPE. And we're still doing road hazards, things of that nature. It's not uncommon for mattresses and couches and ladders and big things. We talked about that on the last episode.
Right.
How does that change now, though? We have to clear those road hazards. So what do we have to do when we go out to get a call to pick up something like that?
Sure. So I think from the materials that are, those safety hazards that are out there, those concerns are brought into our customer service group. Sometimes they go to local dispatch as well, and then that dispatch may contact INDOT to be able to let us know that there's a hazard out on the road. Sometimes the first responder, the county sheriff or state highway trooper may be able to address some of those issues if it's an immediate thing, if they're the closest person to it. But, I actually recently called our customer service line, Jason, as I was driving down the road to report a piece of debris in the roadway. It was out on Interstate 70, and I had no flashing lights to be able to provide myself with safe, to be able to do that safely. And so I used our customer service line to be able to call in and report. I got immediately pushed over because of my employment as an INDOT employee. I talked directly to dispatch in that particular case at the Indy TMC, and they actually issued out an alert to be able to get anybody that was in the area to be able to clear that device or that piece of debris that was in the roadway. And it was really neat to be able to see. I was literally just down the road a couple more miles, and I actually I saw one of our INDOT employees turning around the other direction with his lights on, going right back to be able to pick that piece up. So that's the kind of response that we get when we have something like that in the roadway that's causing a safety hazard.
Yeah, so that's very cool. And you're right. We do typically have pretty quick response, especially when there's a safety hazard involved. So with COVID, with the the moratorium we had on trash pickup, but also the safety practices, did we change anything about how when we go to those and respond to those, were there protocols in place to say, okay, you got to be careful about this, disinfecting, things like that? I mean, it feels like the world has changed so much since the last time we spoke, but it's amazing to me, like, just how cautious people are being in response to COVID. And in our job, when we have to go pick up these things, it seems like it's amazing how much different our response has to be.
Sure.
Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a change in what folks are looking at when we're going out to do some of this type of work. We know that we need to wear gloves when we're picking this stuff up, and our crews are still wearing masks in a lot of cases if they're in vehicles with folks that are in the same crew and the like. And so, but yeah, gloves. I know our contracted litter collection group, as an example, they actually continued to collect in most of those contract locations, but they also were always wearing PPE, right? So that it's one of the things that they normally do. So they've got gloves, and they were wearing masks when they needed to inside vehicles and stuff. But when they got out, they were following the CDC guidelines on that. But a lot of them actually use pickers. So the little grabber tools that you maybe see as seen on TV to help reach to the top of the cabinet or whatever. There's a couple different devices that can be used for that sort of thing to be able to help, for the smaller debris and the like. And so, but for the larger debris, yeah, I mean, just trying to continue to use gloves. And I know we had quite a few different protocols in place for the crews cleaning the vehicles and cleaning the hand, like on the steering wheel and places that you would put your hands and things. And so we did have quite a few protocols associated with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And these people are my heroes too, because just the idea of going out and picking up somebody's pop bottle in the midst of all this it gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm not going to lie to you.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about, of course, we had our moratorium on the smaller trash pickup and things like that. So we've probably seen a little bit of accumulation But that doesn't change the fact that we also have contract litter pickup as well. So let's talk a little bit about that and transition into that conversation. We've got our contracted litter pickup, and that should be going on, now.
Sure. So our contracted litter collection groups, for the most part, is focused on the interstate system, as we talked about the last time. And so we have some collections that are being done on the rural interstates. In that particular case, we're doing 5 collections a year, right-of-way line to right-of-way line in that particular case. And then the urban areas, and some of our urban interstates and a few of those roads in some select locations, we are doing collections in there. Generally, there's 12 collections being done in all those spaces, trying to do once a month kind of a thing. And a couple areas we're doing a little bit more frequently based on the need associated with that. And so, yeah, there's a lot of litter being collected on a regular basis. And, our staff are still going out and are starting to go back out and doing some spot litter collection and out there in the districts. And, we did have kind of a break, the moratorium, as you referred to it, early on, and then we realized that there was a lot more stuff coming up, and as some of that stuff started to pile up, we really started to notice that we had to do some additional cleanups, and we tried to work through that as best we could. We definitely started getting more calls from the public about the litter that's out there, and that was a kind of a good thing. It allowed for us to be able to kind of gauge where we were and seeing some things, and we would try to respond to those real problem areas. But it also gave us an opportunity to really start to be able to push the idea of how folks could be involved and get themselves involved too. We did have a moratorium on the Adopt a Highway program during that time frame because we thought it was going to be safer for everybody to not be gathering in groups and the like, to be able to do what the normal Adopt a Highway group does, right?
Yeah, and you don't think about like Adopt a Highway that way because, you've got a big group of people out there, and there's opportunity for them to be socially distanced. But on the same token, the wider you're spread out on the highway, the more opportunity there is for calamity.
Sure.
To be quite honest
with
you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like so. Tell me a little bit more about what we did. To put the pause on that program, but also now we're bringing it back and how people can get involved.
Sure. So initially what we had So when Adopt a Highway group goes out to collect litter, they actually communicate with the Adopt a Highway coordinators in the district, at the sub-district level perhaps, and they have to go through a process to sign a waiver and make sure that everybody's gone through a safety briefing and the like. And so when those groups started to contact us saying that they wanted to do collections, we had to inform them that we were not going to have those collections during this time frame. And as a result of that, we actually waived their responsibility as part of that agreement that they have signed with us that said that they're going to participate in this program. And so there's an expectation for the number of collections that they would be required to do, and we waived that last year. Fast forward into this spring, we started to understand and better be able to figure out how to start that program back up. I had a number of discussions with some of my peers in other states to see how they were working back into starting their programs up too. And one of the big things that came around, as interesting as it is to think this way, we actually, I worked with our legal group to make sure that our liability and waiver release form did reference following CDC guidelines associated with public health threats and the like. And so we have that back on. That form has been updated, and with the update of that form, I'm able to then kind of say we can open the program back up, and we're allowing folks to get back out there as they're feeling comfortable to start doing it again.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this, Matt. Is the new waiver, is that strictly for new, or does everyone who's involved in the program have to sign the new waiver?
Yeah, so the waiver actually has to be signed with every collection, at every collection for each individual that is participating in that particular collection. And it's just it's a simple waiver that's just saying that it's kind of a hold harmless agreement, if you will, that the participant is not going to hold INDOT liable because they're doing this voluntarily out there. So
yeah, absolutely. And we don't want, it's not that we want to say, we don't want to be held responsible, but it's a matter of, we just went through a global pandemic.
Right.
We just went through one of the most interesting times. I mean, we'll probably never see anything like this in our lifetime again, but we may not see this in our kids' lifetime again. So there's a lot of restructuring, a lot of rethinking how we word waivers and things like that, not necessarily to keep us from being responsible necessarily, but also to make sure that the people out there understand the danger.
Yes, exactly. And so, I mean, we're still going to provide PPE. We definitely already have that piece in place. We supply the vests. We supply some gloves if that's necessary or desired by the group. We even have pickers in many cases that if people don't want to touch the garbage by hand, we have some of these pickers available in many locations. Maybe not all, but there's an expense to that, of course. But there's a number of different tools that can be utilized in that regard to kind of keep yourself distanced from the potential for that exposure, if you will. So
yeah, absolutely. So Matt, let's take a break real quick. We'll come back. We'll talk a little bit about how you can get involved with Adopt the Highway, and we'll also talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing across the agency as far as mowing and potentially making some of our processes a little more efficient. We'll be right back with more on the DOT.
In 2019, distracted driving was a factor in nearly 2,000 injury crashes in Indiana, killing more than 20 people. To make Hoosier roads safer, hands-free while driving is now the law. That means you can't have a mobile device in your hand while driving. You can still use a phone or tablet in your car, but you must use a speakerphone, headset, Bluetooth, or other hands-free technology. Go hands-free. Learn about the new law at handsfreeindiana.com.
Did you know that INDOT also has an eye on the sky? INDOT inspects nearly 120 aviation facilities in Indiana, including seaplane bases and heliports. To learn more about these and other multimodal programs, go to multimodal.indot.in.gov. We're more than just Hoosier Roads.
Welcome back to On the DOT. Matt Kraushar with us, and we're talking litter pickup, and we've talked a lot about kind of our new procedures and sanitizing and how we have managed litter collection in the wake of COVID-19 pandemic. And by the way, I think Matt's with me on this when I say this. Don't throw your trash out the window, people. Yeah. Can we just not? That's one simple thing that we can all do to keep our highways clean and protect our people, our highway workers. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about, we spoke about Adopt a Highway in the last segment and what we did to kind of update our policy based on COVID-19, but let's get away from that for a second. And if somebody's listening that wants to be involved in Adopt a Highway, let's talk about some of the benefits to being involved in Adopt a Highway and how they get involved.
Sure. And Jason, you mentioned that don't throw litter out your window. Don't litter, right? I know last time we talked a little bit about the numbers behind some of that. Last year's numbers, when I totaled these things up, even in the midst of the pandemic and everything that was going on, so we had reduced traffic on the road during the pandemic, right? And so they're
crazy reduced.
Yeah, like very reduced. And between our contractors and our in-house staff, we still ultimately picked up like 3,500 tons of litter and debris on the roadside last year.
And so just like last year's podcast, let's put this into perspective. 3,500 tons. A normal dumpster is what, 6 cubic yards, 3 cubic yards, something like that?
Depends on the size, yeah, sure.
Yeah. So 3,500 tons. How much does one dumpster hold?
It's a lot of dumpsters, Jason. That's what I'm going to tell you.
Because I think last year we equated it to you could fill up Lucas Oil Stadium.
I'm pretty sure you could with this amount of litter and debris across the state. It's unfathomable.
Yeah, it's ridiculous how much trash that is.
Right.
And so again, please. Let's keep our garbage in our car. At least wait till you stop to get to a gas station.
There's lots of places to put your trash in the proper receptacle when you get there. Sorry, I sidetracked there. We were talking about the Adopt a Highway program. And so if you see that litter out on the road, right? And so our Adopt a Highway program is really focused on our state highway system and our U.S. routes. We do not allow the Adopt a Highway program on the interstate system strictly out of safety because of the speed zone that's through those particular areas and access and everything else, right? So an Adopt a Highway group. So say Jason and Matt want to get together as a group and adopt a stretch of road out on State Road 59, a road that I was driving down earlier today to get down here. I would go and I would contact our customer service group through a couple of different options there. There's the online portal that you can do, or you can call in through the hotline for that. And you will be connected with a customer service representative that's going to be able to take that information, understand what it is that you're looking to do. They're going to connect you with the appropriate district. Jason's down here in the Southwest District. We have Southeast. We have all these different districts, and all the districts have a coordinator for the Adopt a Highway program. They're going to get some information from you, understand what your interest is, try to get a good feeling for your level of commitment associated with being able to do that, because it's not an easy task to go out and pick up trash along this stretch of road. It can be a lot, and so try to gauge interest, gauge the ability to do it, and then ultimately we have an application process that the group has to go through, sign. There's a safety briefing that has to go through, and the group would then be able to do their first collection. They provide us with a report on what they collected during that time frame, and after that first collection is done, we actually then produce a sign, a recognition sign associated with that group, and we actually install it on that particular stretch of road in both directions to be able to highlight that group's involvement in the program as a thank you for them to be able to do that. There's a set of expectations and the guidelines associated with that. The district coordinator should be able to help them get that information and go into the details associated with that.
Now, do we still do the Sponsor a Highway program? And that's similar to Adopt a Highway. I don't think there's the trash pickup element. You tell me, because I know there are a couple different programs.
So the Sponsor a Highway program is currently focused in the Indianapolis metro area, and that program is specifically allows for a sponsoring entity. So Jason's business, if he had a side business, he could actually sponsor a stretch of road. A provider then that is an approved provider would collect litter on his behalf in that particular area. But Jason, as being the sponsor, would actually have a sign placed by that provider as kind of as a recognition or a sponsorship sign for that. So
and so, for instance, if you've driven I-70 near Lucas Oil Stadium, you've seen the Colts signs there.
Yep, there's a number of different groups there, and we recently updated the map for that particular program, so you can actually find that on INDOT's website, INDOT Sponsor a Highway. There's a whole segment, a map that's available for that you can see available segments for sponsorship. We've got a couple of different providers that you can then work with to be able to do that and get some recognition sign out there for helping us collect litter out there on the roadside. I mentioned the update of the map. One of the other things that I'm working on with that program is actually trying to look at other options to be able to expand that program beyond just the Indianapolis metro area. And I need to understand the market associated with that, what the interest is in different areas. Maybe it's down here in Evansville. I'm not sure that there's a lot of interest between Evansville and Bloomington on 69, for instance. But if there is interest there, then that's something that we want to be able to capture. And so I've been working with a couple of providers that we have on that program right now to understand some other ways that we may be able to grow that program. One of the things that we're looking at is possibly figuring out a way to be able to sponsor some roadway sweeping, actually, to be able to get some additional sweeping out there to get some of that the smaller debris that builds up on some of our shoulders to be done in that fashion, and again have that recognition sign that's out there. So,
and I'm sure that's an idea that makes a lot of our cyclists statewide very happy.
Yes, yeah.
So, okay, so if you're a business and you're interested in doing the Sponsor a Highway thing in the Indy metro area, which is where it's at right now, but say you're in the in-between areas, how do they let us know that they're interested in something like that? Yeah,
so again, one of the best things that we try to do is I'm trying to understand what the need and the interest is. And so we have a centralized customer service system, and all you need to be able to do as an interested group is to be able to call in, put in that information, put in that request, and that's something that I'm constantly working with our customer service team to be able to gather that information and understand what that interest is or what that need is. And those are going to help me make some decisions to try to modify those programs and make them better suited to our customers, our clients, the Hoosiers.
Yeah, so, exactly. So if you're hearing this and you're not in the Indy metro area, let us know that you're interested, because the information, us knowing that you're interested, helps us expand that program.
Right.
So, Matt, let's take another quick break here real quick, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about mowing and some of the things we're doing this year. We'll be right back with more on the DOT.
This is Sergeant Todd Ringel with Indiana State Police. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, distracted driving claims thousands of lives every year. Many drivers use their cell phones while driving. That creates an enormous potential for fatalities and injuries on our roadways. Distracted driving is any activity that diverts your attention from driving, including talking or texting on your phone. You cannot drive safely unless the task of driving has your full attention. You can help us reduce crashes by putting down your cell phone, avoiding all other distractions, and just drive.
Did you know that INDOT Transit helps to serve more than 32 million riders on 65 transit systems all across the state of Indiana? INDOT is more than just Hoosier Roads. To learn more, go to multimodal.indot.in.gov.
Welcome back to On the DOT. It's our final segment with Matt Kraushar. And Matt, we focused a lot on litter in this episode, but let's talk a little bit about mowing because that's always a hot topic from our customer service standpoint. We are in the midst of spring, a very cold spring, might I add, but it's May and we should be starting to see people out mowing. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, Jason. And so, again, we haven't really changed a whole lot from last year in terms of our policy and our direction as to what we're mowing and how we're mowing necessarily. But so our roadside mowing is done through our contracted mowers. We've got a number of contracted partners that we work with that mow our roadsides very effectively and timely, really. When you think about the number of miles that we're talking about shoulder-wise here, it's a lot. And so with that, there's a whole structure. There's really a pretty good-sized plan that comes behind this process of getting the state mowed from south to north and from east to west. And I mentioned from south to north, that's actually the direction that we start, and that actually goes into the warming that goes on across the state, right? So it warms up sooner in the spring in the south than it does in the north. And so we're theoretically, yeah. And most of the time that holds pretty true. And so what we try to do is we kind of have it broken into three different tiers, the south, the central, and the north, in terms of timing for those different mowing cycles. And so we've started in the south on some of our urban interstates. So the Southern District has started some of those. In fact, just today, I believe, were some of the first cycles getting started in the central districts, actually. When I was getting out of the vehicle today or coming down this way to look at it, I actually saw a crew out doing some stuff in the central area as well. And so I've got them staggered about a week apart to be able to start those urban areas. Following that, or kind of in concert with that, is going to be the rural interstates are going to have their first cycle that's going to be started up. And then shortly after that kind of wave gets done, we're really going to get started into the other state routes, so the U.S. routes and the state routes that are done in that particular case. And so we have different numbers of cycles for each of those different things. But yeah, the mowers are out. I saw some out here today on my way down here, and they're getting busy with it.
So far this year, how has it gone? Because I think we've had a drier spring than we had last year. Because last year, I remember there were just, it seemed like it was weeks on end where it just, what's the meme you see? For the love of God, stop raining.
Sure.
You know? So I felt like we had that last year, but this year it feels like we've been a little drier. Recently, we've had a little more rain, but for the most part, overall, it feels like we've been having a drier spring, and that's conducive to mowing.
Sure, yeah. So the dry conditions are good. It's going to be causing a lot less rutting and things that go on that roadside shoulder. And some of those wetter areas allows us to be able to do a few spots. There's been one or two small delays so far, but right now we're on schedule. Things are looking pretty good. That first wave of cool season grasses has got some seed heads developing, which is why we try to start our cycles when we do, is we're trying to work that biology of the plants and make the most for our mowings when we do that. So,
and that was going to be my next question, because we start early before everything goes out to seed head so that we don't have the spread of these invasives. I mean, last time I think we talked about autumn olive and the dogwood tree, or not the dogwood trees, but the pear trees, things
sure.
like that. And so we want to keep those thistle and Johnson grass. I mean, there's so many different species that we have on our highways that we want to keep under control, and we try to do so with spraying, but if it's a vital importance that we get it mowed before it spreads. Is that
so? Yeah, so it's definitely a multifaceted approach. So we definitely have multiple different tools that we're using in our toolbox to be able to control the vegetation and manage the vegetation within our right of way. And so mechanical works is one of those things. So we're doing mowing and using forestry mulchers for some of the woody vegetation and the like, and we're also trying to couple that with selective herbicides whenever possible to be able to control things like Johnson grass or the teasel or the thistle that's out there, Canada thistle that's growing out there. And There's only so much resources to be able to go around to try to control those things, and we've been taking a pretty aggressive approach here in the last couple of years, and we're making headway on a lot of those regards for a lot of those invasive species, and taking that targeted approach. And it's, you can only eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? And so that's kind of one of the things that we're really trying to do. And I commented to a couple folks on the way down with a phone call or two about some vegetation stuff that I'm seeing a lot of really positive results from the program that we started back in 2019. We still got a little ways to go, and some of those invasive species like the pear tree are really if you saw them this spring, that's that big white tree with the white flowers on it. You're starting to see just how aggressive those things are. If I can make a shameless plug, I will say, please stop planting pear trees. We do not need pear trees in our state. I should say more specifically the Callery pear, or the Bradford pear is a horticultural variety of that. It's definitely something that's really impacting our right-of-way and natural areas, and it's got a very negative effect. So.
Yeah, I've heard arborists on several occasions, they just trash those Bradford pears particularly. And we've actually got a sign up on US 41 coming from Princeton. If you're heading north toward Vincennes, you'll see it. It says what does it say? Bradford pears are pretty ugly.
Yeah. So actually, Jason, there's a number of different areas that have done some programs, kind of what you call it, but a reward program that if you take a selfie with the Bradford pear that you cut down and removed it from existence on this planet, that you'll actually be given a native tree in place of that. I know that there was a couple of places down in South Carolina that did some of these programs. There's actually been, I think, a few different programs here in Indiana. I know in Hamilton County there was a kind of a Bradford pear, I don't know what you call it, what that term would be, where you take a selfie showing that you murdered this tree, right? Because that's what we want, because they are spreading aggressively, and we'd much rather see a native tree growing in that particular space that's not going to have that negative impact. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who hear us talking about this, the reason that Bradford pears are so bad is because they are invasive and because they're spreading and they're choking out the native life.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's correct. That's exactly right.
And we discussed that in our last podcast. So if you'd like to hear more information about why we don't like Bradford pears in the state of Indiana, please go back and listen to our last episode with Matt Kraushar. So Matt, we're running short on time here, but I do want to talk a little bit about our herbicide program. One question that I wanted to ask you, and I hope this isn't too big of a curveball for you. Have we changed up our herbicide program? I know that last time we talked about how aggressive we are with particular invasive species. Johnson grass is one of them, but we see farmers off of right away when they go to kill Johnson grass, when they spray it's dead, it's brown, it's gone, whatever. But sometimes in our spraying, I don't know if it's just because we do it broadcast, or maybe it's our methods, or maybe it's our concentration. We don't necessarily get it sometimes as much as, say, the private citizens do. Is there a reason for that? And have we made have we taken steps toward adjusting our methods to make sure that when we kill it, it stays dead?
So that's a great question, Jason. And so it's a little bit of a curveball, but I think I can work my way through it.
I do apologize.
No, you're
for
all
that.
right. Yeah, no. And so with all of our herbicide applications, we're trying to use the best data that's available to us in terms of selecting herbicides and what chemistries to use and what timing to do and everything else. And with Johnson grass specifically, in that particular case, we use a product that's relatively selective to that particular species, but we're also the difference between our crop, and I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna try to tie the pieces together there. Our crop is our turf grass that's out there, and so we're trying to control a grass inside a grass, and that makes things really challenging, and it really limits the chemistries or products that are available to be able to control that. If you're in the agricultural field, so where you have corn or soybeans, many of those are a glyphosate-resistant product or something like that. You may be able to use glyphosate, a non-selective product, on that particular Johnson grass that may be grown in that space.
Because it doesn't matter if they kill everything.
Because there's nothing else to kill in that particular space, right? And so because the Roundup or the glyphosate would not be impactful on their crop because it's been modified to be able to resist that or be tolerant of that. And so in our particular case, we can't just use a non-selective treatment, because if we were to kill everything to include the Johnson grass and our crop, the turf that's in that particular space, we open ourselves up to the potential for erosion or new invasion for other species that may come into that particular space. But what I would say with that, though, is that we are working on doing a number of different treatments there. We do treat a lot of acres of Johnson grass. The South, has got quite a bit. It used to be said that south of 70 in Indiana was kind of the way for Johnson grass, and unfortunately that's not really the case anymore. We really start to look, and we're seeing it all the way from south to north. There's more in the south than there is in the north. Hopefully it stays that way. We're being pretty aggressive with it up in the northern parts too. But it's a piece that we're working on, and I'm actually looking at the possibility of including a couple different chemistries this fall for some treatments for some Johnson grass, actually to change up how we're doing things to see if we can improve some of our control methods for that.
Exactly. So for those listening, we're not trying to kill. We're trying to kill the Johnson grass, but we can't kill everything else in the process. So that may be one of the best ways I've heard it explained. Sure. So thank you for that. Matt, we've just got a couple minutes left, and I do want to hit on some of the things we're doing to make ourselves a little bit more efficient. You and I spoke about this, but one of the things we talked about, the amount of manpower we spend mowing at our facilities. And we want more people out on the roads doing that stuff. And of course we want to take pride in our facilities. We want our yards at our units and our subs to look really good. But it feels like we've got a lot of people spending hours upon hours upon hours on mowers, and we're trying to change that. Is that right?
So, Jason, you're talking about efficiency here, and there's a reason that mowing your yard is called a chore.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
It's a chore, and I don't care what kind of equipment that you have or tools that you have to be able to do that work. It's still a chore, and it still takes a fair bit of time, right? And so one of the things that we've been looking at actually is trying to reduce the amount of time that we would have staff dedicated to going out and doing some of that work. And we're actually even looking at right now autonomous mowers.
Which is on par with what our commissioner has been talking about with autonomous vehicles for, ever since he got into his position.
Exactly. So everybody's heard about the Roomba, right? The little robot that floats around the floors in your home and sweeps the floor. And
I have one at my house. It has googly eyes on it.
Okay.
Thanks to my son.
Cool. So the technology is very similar. It's got some boundaries, so it's kind of like a dog fence that gets put in this particular case, and those wires go around the border, and the robot goes out and it mows literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It can be raining. It doesn't matter. This thing's out with a couple of little razor blades, and it's just cutting the grass. I was just today looking at one of the spots that we've got a couple different locations that we're doing some pilot program to kind of understand and gauge what the effectiveness is and everything else. And, one of the things that I talked to on the facilities manager with this was, I said, well, what do you think, Carl? How's it looking, And he goes, I don't have a golf course, but this looks about like a golf course. It's working pretty well. We have some hiccups. We've had some mechanical issues with a couple of little things that we're working out, and we're trying to understand that process. There's some audits that we have to do to some of our landscaping and the like, but it's a pretty neat technology. We still have some discovery and some research to do to better understand that tool. But in that area, he hasn't had to mow it yet this year. The robot's doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And for those who may be thinking, well, why do they need robot mowers? Why can't we? People don't realize the sheer amount of yard that we have at our facilities. Like you and I were out here. We're at Linton Subdistrict, and by the way, we want to say a huge thank you to our Linton Subdistrict Manager and now acting Highway Maintenance Director, Dustin Miller, for allowing us to use this facility. But we're here at Linton Sub, and there's probably just in one area in the back where we store things, you said, 3 to 4 hours of mowing?
I would think, yeah.
And we're doing all that with a zero-turn mower. And let's put it in perspective, 3 to 4 hours for somebody being on a mower, plus having to clean the equipment, maintain it, take care of it. You're looking at, just to mow this yard one time, a literal day's worth of work. And we're paying somebody to do that when they could be doing something else that's, I don't want to say more productive, because obviously we want our facilities to look nice, but on the same token, we've got, roadway issues that need to be handled. And these are the same people that are handling roadway issues.
Sure.
We've got facilities that need maintenance and upkeep in order to stay compliant with all of the standards that we have to stay. How much time do we spend mowing when we could be putting time into those particular activities?
Yeah, and so part of this process that I've been looking at, Jason, we're talking over 100 facilities statewide, right? And so back to that chore thing, right? Just like it is at home, it's a necessary evil that you have to do at least some of, right? Reevaluating necessarily what spaces do need mowed, what spaces don't need mowed, or the frequency that they need mowed, or the method that we use to mow them. Those are all things that we're looking at very closely, trying to figure out a way to do more with less. And so the idea to be able to look into and understand those efficiencies, we're driving that road, trying to figure out a way to get there. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Matt, we are out of time for this episode, but I do want to thank you for coming on. And do you have any final parting thoughts, anything that you'd like to just get off your chest? I know that we want to talk about litter quite a bit, and we really want to drive home that point. Keep your litter in your car, please. But anything else that you'd like to share with us before we get out of here?
No, I can't stress enough the opportunity for folks, if they have a concern that they have on our roadsides or on the roadway, please utilize our customer service portal. That is the best way. Jason and I talked earlier today about this idea of taking information, taking data, and turn it into information and making decisions with it. And so if we don't know that there's an issue, there's not much of a way for us to be able to correct it. And maybe we're doing something right. Call in and give us praise. Nobody likes praise more than the group that doesn't get a lot, right? We get a lot of we get some negative pressure sometimes about stuff, but we also very much enjoy praise associated with the things that we're doing right and the things that you want to see more of.
Yeah, and it's not even so much praise as it is let us know what we need to keep doing.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So I tell you what, Matt, we will play the ad for our customer service portal right after this. So thank you for being on the DOT with us.
Thank you.
Somebody needs to report that pothole.
Why aren't they mowing the grass in the median?
When are they going to fix this road?
You know there's an easy way to get answers to those questions and report the problems you see on interstates, U.S. routes, and state roads. Dial 1-855-INDOT-4U to talk to a live customer service professional. That's 855-463-6848. Hate talking on the phone or have a fear of human interaction? We've got you covered. Go online to INDOT4U.com to use our Report a Concern tool. You can also report a concern through our INDOT mobile app for iPhone and Android. If you've got questions, we've got answers at 855-INDOT4U or online at INDOT4U.com.
Thank you for listening to On the DOT. Be sure and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoy this show, please spread the word by leaving us a 5-star review. INDOT is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and also on the web at indot.in.gov. The INDOT app for Apple and Android devices can be a handy tool if you're looking for road conditions or project information. To report a concern on a number state route, U.S. route, or interstate, please call our toll-free number at 1-855-INDOT-4U. You can also report your concerns online 24/7 at INDOT4U.com. Thank you for listening and safe travels.